Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome into UnAnchored Boston. And as always, we are brought to you by Cold Springs RV, your destination for all things camping. And where? We're in New Hampshire, of course, and by the great George Gray, the big wheelie column at George Gray's Lexington Toyota 409 Mass Ave in Lexington. All right, we are thrilled to have with us one of the great writers of our generation here to what do you laugh for, Ron? You are one of the great writers of our generation.
I appreciate that. Not everybody would probably share that opinion, but I did the best I could for a long time.
But Ron Borges is here, and I can't wait to get started. And Lobel always makes me hand the formal introduction off to him because he's the elder statesman. I have to defer to him all the time, Ron. That's how it works. All right.
Yeah,
So,
I
Robert,
understand.
take it away.
You're so full of shit. Sometimes it's just unbelievable.
We're off to a good start.
There we go.
Borges, if I'm Drake May, I want to be traded.
I don't want to get in the game. I'll tell you that much.
I want to be traded. If I'm Drake May, what future do I have here?
Yeah, well,
I can't play, and I can't play for one thing, and two, I don't want to play for these guys.
All right. I now understand why early in the summer when they said they had to teach him how to call the plays. I can see why he didn't want to call any plays. He just wanted to stay in the huddle where it's safe. Good Lord.
I mean, what is his future here? In the next 5 or 6 years? I mean, why? Why would he? Maybe he's going to get paid good money. Okay, fine. But why wouldn't? He's got no future here. The quarterback here's got no future, none.
No, I mean this. These kind of dynasties, if you look historically, and that's what sort of made me chuckle over the last couple of seasons. When you have a long run like this, and the Patriots had probably one of the longest in history, the rebuild, quote unquote, it doesn't happen in 2 years or 3 years. I mean, the 49ers were down forever. The Cowboys are still down. The Packers were down forever. The Cleveland Browns were down forever. I mean, that's the
forever being the key word. Forever.
Forever, yeah. I mean, it takes the Niners was like 20-something years. That's just how it is because, you've been on the other end of it for so long and you're drafting later, so you make more mistakes. And certainly Belichick cornered the market on mistakes when it came to picking players, I mean, God, I look at some of those picks and I think, geez, if he'd have been picking instead of Parcells, they wouldn't have taken Lawrence Taylor. They would have taken some guy you've never heard of, I mean, it's just like, my God. So that's the situation they're in. And I think the other thing that happens, as you guys know, in these kinds of situations is you're trying to rebuild. And obviously, even if you hit, you're not going to hit on a multitude of guys. And so you hit on one or two guys, or one of those guys gets hurt, or he turns into Jabril Peppers and loses his mind, whatever heck happened there a couple of days ago. So you lose this guy or that guy. So you're constantly churning players. I mean, they got an offensive line with four guys who can't play, and poor David Andrews, who's just physically a wreck because he's played so much. So that's a lot of holes to fill.
And of course, he's out for the rest of the season.
Right. Can you blame him? I would have got that surgery before the season started. I don't feel that good, does he?
Well, that's the point. It's Drake May. Please just send me somewhere where I got a chance to play and win.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and I think that the criticism of Brissett is really getting, in my opinion, out of line. I mean, you can tell when they're going to rip him when they start off by saying, I have all the respect in the world for Jacoby Brissett, and then for the next 5 minutes they say, he stinks in every way, and he's the reason that they're in the situation they're in. Look, he's a career backup quarterback, playing like a career backup quarterback on a team that stinks. What's he supposed to do? I mean, I did a little research. You guys know I love research.
Yep.
And he's on pace right now to be sacked 58 times, which is one below the club record of Tony Eason when he was decapitated 59 times in 1984 and never was the same player again. I'll tell you a quick funny story. That season, they were playing the Cardinals. And for who knows what reason, I became friendly with various players over the years. And I was friendly with E.J. Jr., who was the great pass rusher for the Cardinals. And they sacked him it's like 7, 8, 9 times in the game. So I'm standing down there by the tunnel after the game like we all used to do. And here comes EJ. He comes to me and he says, dude, you got to tell that boy to run. He's just standing there getting killed. And I said, well, EJ, I mean, there's no place to run. He goes, I know. And this is kind of the situation that you're in. And you can say Brissett is part of the problem. Clearly, he's part of the problem. But when you're upside down, Elway told me one time, you turn quarterbacks upside down, we all look the same. And that's the way Brissett looks. He looks like a guy he knows he's going to get killed. I mean, he gets killed even when he completes a pass. What I don't understand is they get called for holding 5 times in the Miami game. Who are they holding? I mean, jeepers, crow. It's not good. It's not good.
So it's not only the holding; it's the rest of the other penalties too.
Oh, right.
I mean, and total game management and just blah blah blah. You can do the whole checklist. I don't know whether it's decisions on time management, on clock management, on game management, making the same mistakes you made like two weeks ago against Seattle and Miami. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is, often what you see happen in these kinds of, you've got, look, the three of us all lived through the era of Rod Rust and the great Dick McPherson was a great college coach and a wonderful guy, but he shouldn't have been an NFL head coach. And when the guy at the top is in over his head, which Mayo in the long run may be a good coach, but he's an inexperienced guy who's not only never been a head coach, he's never really even been a coordinator. And he's unsolidly backed by an offensive and defensive coordinators who have never called a play. I mean, normally you're going to put a young coach in there as the head coach. There's some grizzled old Dante Scarnecchia guy who's been around for 44 years as a coordinator or assistant head coach or whatever to kind of help him. Well, where's his help? He looks to his left and there's Alex Van Pelt who's trying to figure out what play to call because he's never called a play. And he looks to the other side and he's got a defensive coordinator whose supposed vaunted defense never can stop anybody when they need to stop him near the end of the game. So he's got no help. And as you point out, Bob, what do you end up with? You end up blowing the clock like they did before halftime, which cost them points. And they're not good enough to cost themselves anything. I mean, they're life and death if they play completely clean. They're life and death. The one thing I would add as an aside, if I owned the Cincinnati Bengals, I would fire my head coach. You lost to those guys? You lost to the Patriots?
Yeah, we all were misled after that win over the Cincinnati Bengals. We said, "Holy mackerel! Wow, they're disciplined. They only had one really miscue, and boy, were we wrong." Whose fault is it that Gerard Mayo was a head coach? This to me reeks of Butch Hobson when the Red Sox hired him and put him in there. It's very similar.
Yeah. I think there was 2 things going on. They like him. He's a very bright guy, as you guys know. Great guy to talk to. Was not going to push back too much. He's happy to have the job. And I think they like the idea of hiring a black head coach, I think, which is fine. And I think there was a sense that, well, he's already starting to get some other teams interested and we're going to make this change. And we don't want to lose who we think he is. So they, in my opinion, panicked. And they also did what teams do over and over again. You have a disciplinarian for a while, and then it goes bad. You bring in Pete Carroll with, party hats. And then, that goes for a little while, then it doesn't work out. Now you get rid of the party hats, you bring in another disciplinarian. So they had the disciplinarian, and now they're bringing in the Kumbaya guy who says, let's all reason together. It's I'll tell you guys a story, which I would tell Gerard if he asked me. Many years ago, I went down to do a piece for the Globe on Jerry Glanville, who was coaching in Atlanta at the time. Really good coach, great guy to talk to. So we're walking around in the locker room, in the coach's locker room, early in the morning. And he opens up his locker, and there's mug shots of all 52 players on his team, every one of them. I said, Jesus, why you got that there? What, you can't remember the players? He goes, no, I want to be reminded every morning of the 52 guys who were here to screw me. And then he said, don't take it wrong. They don't mean to screw you. They just look at it different. They're looking at their thing. And you got to remember, those 52 guys are not really here to help you first. They're here to help them first. And I think that when you forget that, you end up with some of these situations that you have. I mean, look at Sunday's game. Keon White's supposed to be one of their best defensive players, supposedly, right? Personally, I think he's just another guy. But regardless, they think he's Dick Butkus. Okay. What does he do in one of the most critical points of the game? He commits 2 personal fouls in 4 plays, gives up 30 yards worth of penalties. Miami drives for the only time in the game and scores a touchdown. This is your best guy, supposedly, or one of your best guys, who thinks he can do that. And he did. He did something stupid the week before that too. What kind of a Parcells always used to say there's 2 kinds of penalties. There's your sort of aggressive kind of penalties, and you just sort of accept them, and selfish penalties. Oh, he pushed me. Oh, he cursed at me. He said something about my sister. And bang, flags are coming up. So if your best guy thinks he can do that, in fact, he knows he can do it, because what are they going to do? They're going to put him on the bench for the next guy. When they say next man up, that doesn't apply with the Patriots. So it's just you end up looking undisciplined and all of that, somewhat because you are, and somewhat because the players aren't stupid. They know, we got a 52-man roster, but 20 of these guys you don't want to put on the field. So what are they going to do if I get mad and they had 12 penalties against the Dolphins. That's 105 yards in penalty yardage against them. They actually had 13 penalties, but Miami finally called off the dogs and declined one. How do you commit 13 penalties? To your point, Mike, about undisciplined, they got 12 men on the field. This is about the 3rd game where they've had 12 men on the field. Can they not count?
Yeah.
I mean, one of those guys must have majored in math, I would think.
Don't count on it.
It's ridiculous.
So is which leads me to the Peppers saga.
Oh yeah.
This used to be when Don Lowry was the PR director. He'd have the clerk of courts and about 9 different things on speed dial, because every Monday or Wednesday morning, he'd be trying to bail somebody out. Have we come back to this? Have we circled all the way around yet?
Well, it's not a good look. I always try to, when I was working in the business, I always try to tell myself to, cool your jets until you know the whole story. And then I don't know the whole story. He's obviously got a lawyer saying he's innocent, as every lawyer does, and he's got video evidence to prove it. Well, first off, from what I understand, one of the things they're claiming is that Shute got angry when he told her he didn't want to, sleep with her anymore. It was 4:00 in the morning. That's when you came to the conclusion you didn't want to sleep with her. What the hell are you talking about? It's absurd. Number one. The most troubling thing to me is, and I don't know who's at fault here, but this is a guy your team has picked to be one of its captains. And he's got coke in his wallet. And at 4:00 in the morning, the day before a game, even though he's not playing, he does have to show up at the minimum for treatment. This is what you get involved in. It's again, you give him the benefit of the doubt. You're innocent until proven guilty. Maybe it's a whole shakedown, but it's certainly a bad look. There's no doubt about it. Can he survive it? If Myra Kraft was still alive, he'd probably already be fired. But my guess is, at the best, if you ran a videotape of whatever went on in that apartment that night in the early morning, his mother probably wouldn't be proud of his behavior. So it's not good. And these are the things. Look, we lived through it. I mean, Irving Fry got in a car accident on Route 1 at halftime one time, if we'll recall. So these are the kinds of nitwit things that happen when you're losing and you're losing faith in each other, which clearly they are. This finger pointing has already started, and somewhat rightfully so. I thought Borges a week ago was right when he said, we got guys playing selfish. Keon White, you take 30 yards worth of penalties, that's selfish. That's putting whatever your personal grievance is ahead of good of your team. Peppers.
And that you're already hearkening back to the Belichick era and saying this would never have happened.
Well, we say that, but I would only caution this. He had a murderer in the locker room, Bob, so let's take it easy on this. Would never happen.
I understand.
Yeah, that's a bad one.
Chandler
I covered
Jones.
the league for 49 years. Only knew of that kind of thing. Ray Caruth down in Carolina and this guy. There may have been others I didn't know, but I was with the Raiders for a long time, as you know. No murderers in the locker room. Lunatics, yes. Murderers, no.
Interesting. I mean,
right. I mean, you're right, though, Bob, in a way. And a lot of people are going to say, well, this wouldn't happen with Belichick and that wouldn't happen with Belichick. They won 4 games last year with Belichick. So, he left the cupboard more than bare. There are no players. The grand irony to me is Kraft used to talk to me all the time when Parcells was here. His great fear was that Parcells was just going to quit one day, which, of course, was kind of his track record in various places. And he'd just be stuck with nothing because Parcells sort of worked year to year, not in terms of long-term planning. Well, when Parcells left, he left you a Super Bowl team. When his disciple left, he left you this. This is what he left you. So maybe he was worrying about the wrong guy.
Why did nobody see this coming? That the cover was going to be this bare. Did anybody see it 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and finally last year? Did people say, "Oh my goodness, what has happened to you?"
Well, I can only say my mother used to have a saying: "Son, don't break your arm patting yourself on the back." But now I will do that. I did see it coming just because of the way the 2019 draft, for example. Not a single one of the players they took that year is playing pro football anymore. You can't have barren draft after barren draft after barren draft. You can't take guys like the receiver from Georgia Tech there, whose name I blot out of my N'Keal Harry. You can't take Cole Strange, who's just not a good player. He's not terrible, but you're taking a first-round pick for a journeyman guard. You can't keep doing that and not pay a big price for it as your great players age. Now look, you're never going to replace Tom Brady. You're probably never going to replace Gronkowski. I mean, you're talking about 2 of the greatest players to ever play their positions. So, it's not that easy to find. But when you miss on everybody and you bring in these free agents, although I got to give the Patriots credit, their defense last Sunday made Jonnu Smith look like the player they thought they signed for all that money a few years ago. But you're missing on free agents. I mean, Hunter Henry. I'm so sick and tired of hearing about Hunter Henry. Look, he's a good-looking guy. I'd love to look like him. He's a great-looking guy. But you want to talk about the definition of average. That's him. And what does he do? He commits 2 pre-snap penalties. He's supposed to be a veteran presence, a good player who kind of keep these young guys in line. And you're the guy committing pre-snap penalties. So
the last one was a tough one.
Oh my God! Yeah, I mean, could there have been a worse? When you think about it, you add the penalty yardage that they lost for him moving before the snap. Instead of catching the ball where he caught it, he catches it in the end zone. But he didn't. Who runs an in cut with 12 seconds to go? Mike, your dad would have been blowing his brains out as a coach. Who runs an in cut with 12 seconds to go? You got no timeouts left, so you get tackled on a 4-yard line or 3-yard line, and the game's over. Who does that? Your most experienced supposed guy. Or they called that, which is just,
Right, even worse.
Yeah, that's an indictable offense if that's the play.
Right, no. So,
so I think this, to your point, Mike. Yeah, I could see it coming. A lot of people didn't want to see it coming. I mean, look, after they won, this is the beauty of being a fan over what we did for a living. after they beat Cincinnati, I had people telling me, and I heard people on the radio saying they had a chance to win 9 games. In what universe? The game.
Wait, hold on, Ronnie. Wherever he is on your screen, he's wearing blue right now.
Oh, really? Sorry, Mike.
Well,
I didn't know that.
He's one of those 9 gamers, okay?
Sorry, Mike. Wow. But and to me,
I ate 8, not 9, 8.
Just saying.
Well,
I'm sorry.
wow. Talk about throwing your pal under the bus, Bob.
Oh, no, I just, you know,
I thought this was a question about 5 years. Well, how many games do they win over 5 years? I didn't know it was 1 year.
Well, you know, and the problem with that victory is and as you said earlier, Mike, and you're right, they played really disciplined. They played really, you know, close to the vest. They played the way they have to play to win in that game.
Yeah.
The problem was you can't win very often that way because you're not going to play that clean, number one. You're not going to play Cincinnati, which loses the opening game every season since the dawn of time. They're never ready to go. I don't know what they do out there in the summer, but they don't play football, obviously. You know, so it was great. But I remember saying at the time, this is just not sustainable. You can't. The line isn't good enough. The running back, I think, is a fumble machine. Now he did get through Sunday's game without fumbling, which was good for Stevenson. But you think he's going to put the ball on the deck against Houston? I'd say there's a good chance, you know. But that's when you're a fan, you look and you find every reason why they're going to win. You know, they look at the schedule before the season. Oh, this is a win. This is a win. This one. A friend of mine was doing that last year. All these games they were going to win. And I said, here's the only flaw in your thinking. And he said, what's that? I said, people in all these other cities are looking at the schedule and looking at New England and saying, there's a win. You know, so and that's kind of the situation that they're in. They have to play, in my mind, nearly perfectly to win. They're averaging like 8 points a game in the last 3 games, I think it is. You can't beat anybody 8 points a game. I don't care how good your defense is. You add on to that, all they had to do was not let the Dolphins drive 80 yards down the field at the end of the game.
Well, the Dolphins' best offense was the Patriots' penalties.
Well, yeah, right. And here's one of the things, and I wanted to bring this up because I hear it all the time. Well, the defense is just on the field too long. It's the offense's fault because, you know, they can't, the 3 and out, the defense is on the field too long. I've heard that since my first day of high school football, you know, when dinosaurs roamed the earth. And I always thought, okay, so our defense is on the field too long. What about the other team's offense? They're on the field too long too. How come they don't get tired? Are they like mainlining Monster Energy drinks in the sidelines? I mean, it's so stupid. You know, my defense was tired, but the offense wasn't tired. I mean, what are those big old fat offensive linemen doing? They're wrestling with your big old fat defensive linemen. I would think they're pretty tired too. So it's a pretty lame excuse. To me, this defense, and I'm not exonerating the offense, it's been awful. But their defense is so overrated and was last year. They could never stop anybody when they had to do it. Not last year and not this year. But I think in the defense of people who sort of support the defense, they look at the offense, and if the 3 of us were playing defense, we'd be better than the offense. So they say, well, the defense is it's the offense's fault. You know, and I don't know how you guys looked at the game. One of the things that mystified me is they beat Cincinnati the way they do, and they basically declare, this is what we are. We're going to pound the rock, and we're going to play defense, and we'll throw it when we have to. But we know we got to run the ball, control the clock, eat up time, play defense. So they go out against a terrible defense against the run, behind an offensive line that is getting the quarterback killed. And they throw the ball 34 times. And they run it, I think it was 18 or 19 times. And they run for 140 yards why didn't you continue to run the ball? That's on the coaches, and if you're a player, I'm sure you're sitting there saying, what the hell are we doing? Why did we just keep pounding it and running it? And it wasn't like that. And if they're down 14 points, 21 points, okay, you got to throw the ball, but they weren't. So I put that on the coaches.
Ron, do you feel that there's too much of this? Like on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we scripted all these plays, and no one goes with the feel of the game. All right, we can't pass the ball. We need that. I don't know if the game plan says we're supposed to throw the ball 35 times today,
Right.
but you got to go. Sometimes you got to go with what's in here and not what's on the stupid play card. It drives me out of my mind.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think a lot of times, those play cards, as you see those coordinators, they're so huge that I don't think they actually see the game. They're like covering their whole face, and they're just like, "Oh, geez, we just ran for 8 yards on that play. Well, let's not call that again." Parcells always used to tell me, until they stop it, I'm going to keep doing it. I mean, the Packers. Right. Who didn't know that the Packers under Lombardi were going to run the sweep? Yeah, well, you can't stop it. Well, I'm going to keep running it until you stop it. And until that time, I'm going to keep knocking your guys over and gaining yards. So you're right. I think they get so caught up in, well, this is what we're supposed to call in this situation. And that I just found the numbers. They ran 18 times, because one was a scramble, 18 times for 141 yards.
Ronnie, by the way, I just want to point this out. The Jets just fired their head coach.
They did?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Aaron Rodgers rears his ugly noggin.
Robert Saleh's out.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Wow. How about that, huh?
Wow. I can't say I'm totally shocked. I'm always a little shocked when they do this in the middle of the season, but that performance on Sunday was god-awful. And that sort of Aaron Rodgers reeling from a hug from his coach a couple weeks ago. Not a good look, like
the question now is, nobody wants to be the first one to blink this early in the season.
Hello, Bill. Are you available to come in? Can you put down the underdog and come over and finish the season for us?
Right.
And really be the HC of the NYJ.
I don't think he'll do it because I know he does. He has no use for Woody Johnson, the owner, and he does love Aaron Rodgers. But I don't think that you'll ever see Belichick come in this kind of middle, because he, like Parcells, are big believers in their guys. I got my staff. I got my guy. I said to Parcells one time, how come the guy who's already there isn't your guy when you become the head coach? I mean, why do you think he's like an enemy of the state? And he gave me a pretty good explanation. I'm not saying he's an enemy of the state. He might even be a better coach than my guy. But I barely have to talk to my guy for him to know what I want. I talk in shorthand, and everybody understands, what we're talking about a particular player, a scheme that we want, or something we want to stay away from. We don't have to have an hour-long meeting. So I don't think he'll ever see Belichick come in. I mean, you never know. He's kind of the king of the media right now, so I think he doesn't need the money, that's for sure. So I don't think he would go there. It'll be interesting to see, to me, if they make Hackett the head coach, who is Rodgers' guy. I mean, he was just awful. And if he's the head coach, Aaron Rodgers is really the head coach. But I always thought Saleh was a good coach, but he may very well be sort of a classic second lieutenant. He's a good defensive coordinator, but just not a head man. And you guys all knew Ernie Zampese, who was a dear friend of mine long before he got to New England, Stamper, as we used to call him. And I said to Stamper one time, you're a great offensive coordinator. How do you ever want to be a head coach? He said, I never wanted to be the head coach because I knew I wouldn't be any good at it. And I thought to myself, that's a guy, it's a pretty self-actualized guy. He realized what he was good at and what he wasn't, And I think a lot of these guys naturally don't know that, or they think they can do it. And I may or may not be able to do it, but I'm sure he's figuring out in these 5 weeks, there's a lot more to this thing than just coaching the team, and walking into a meeting room and giving a speech.
Hey, let me ask you this, Ron. Why is every team that has drafted a quarterback in the first round, the Bears, the the Commanders, Bo Nix with Denver, and there would have been J.J. McCarthy in Minnesota if he didn't get hurt. Why did they all decide? Let's go with our first round draft pick. Let's play him. Let's just see what happens. But the Patriots are the only team that said, we're going to protect him. Was the Patriots' offensive line that far inferior to all those other teams, or should the Patriots have given this guy a shot?
Well, I think, and again, I want to preface it by saying, I'm not down there every day now where, I used to have a lot of guys talking to me about things. So I'm speculating a bit, but I think it was a combination of two things from what I understand. First was, for much of the time, they didn't think he was ready to run a NFL offense against an NFL defense. If you remember early on, they said, we got to teach him how to call a play. Well, if you got to teach the guy how to call a play, probably not ready to play quarterback in high school, let alone in the NFL. So I think that was part of it. And then you combine that with, they can say all they want about what they thought this offensive line was going to be. If they thought these guys were a competent offensive line, then they are incompetent analysts of football talent. I mean, I could see these guys go and play. They're not athletic. They're not strong. They get overwhelmed. The amount of times you just see a guy just blow by one of their offensive linemen, just by him, boom, gone. He doesn't even wing the guy. At least wound him a little bit. So I think you add those two things together and you say, certainly, and the Cincinnati game was a good example. The guy who gave him the best chance to the win was the veteran quarterback who wasn't going to make mistakes. I think they've gotten to the point now where the veteran quarterback is starting to make mistakes, partially because he's getting punched in the face 20 times a game. That kind of make your mind.
So is it time to bring the other guy in? I mean, you're paying him. And there's the whole, there's a whole section of people that think doesn't matter if you let him sit and watch or you put him in and play him. I mean, there's that division of what philosophy you take. So now it's time, fans, let's just take the fan base. Hey, we're paying the guy, let's see him play. Right. Or I'm the owner, we're paying the guy, let's see him play. Or is he going to get killed? And, where do you go here?
Yeah, well, I think he is going to get killed. But I think so would Jaden Daniels. I don't care who's back there. Lamar Jackson would get killed. He wouldn't get killed as much as Jacoby Brissett, but, it's just not a circumstance where you have any time to make, good decisions. Even when Jacoby's completing passes, he's getting hammered.
Well, what would you guys do? Lynchy, what would you do? Just start Ronnie, what would you do? Is it time to bring him in? What really? If it was in your guys had to make the decision. You're in the seat now. Do you decide play him or keep him on the sideline?
I don't start him. And I'll tell you why. I don't buy into the injury thing. And if I was a player on the team, I would be really resentful of that. Like, it's okay if I get injured, but it's not okay. We can't risk this guy. But my family, we don't give a damn about my wife and kids, what happens to me, So I don't like that part. But I just think if you look at the broad history, which nobody likes to do, especially in today's society, everything's a snapshot. It's like, my 18-year-old son thinks that every problem should be solved in 15 seconds or less, and when you look at this situation, if you look at the broad history of highly drafted quarterbacks who got thrown in there early, most of them don't survive. They get killed when they're on a team like this. They get killed and they're never the same. They don't recover. Do I want to risk this guy on a team? How many more games are we going to win if he's the quarterback? One more? Two more? He's not Jaden Daniels. He's not going to run 84 yards down the sideline like Daniels did on Sunday. He's not. Anybody who thinks he is didn't watch him play, number one. Number two, he's going to make more mistakes than the other guy. Now, we all know you learn more by playing than you do by watching. That's for sure. But if you're playing in a situation where there's no chance, what are you really learning? I mean, you're learning, look out. There's a lot of Tim Couch, #1 pick. Career was destroyed in one season.
So how many years are we going to go with this? I mean, we could go with this forever. I mean,
well, I mean, look, if next year you draft a top offensive lineman with your first pick, it's going to be a high pick. You're probably going to get one or two best offensive linemen available. If you hit on that and you hire one for good, solid, or maybe even above solid offensive lineman in free agency, you solve 40% of your line problem. If you solve 40% of your line problem, then you can help out the other slappies, but when it's 100% of a problem, you can't. So that in itself would help. You hope one or two guys develop, and you hope you can get somebody else, one or two other guys, because you're still going to be picking high. Are you going to just reverse and become, the Patriots under Tom Brady? No, but it can get better by a considerable margin.
So you said
if you put him out there and you get him killed.
Yeah. What
same people hollering to play him are going to be saying, "What were they thinking?" Because they don't have to make the decision.
That's a very good point, and it's well spoken for that side of the voting audience that says we should keep him right where he is. What do you think, Mike?
I say play him because he's more elusive than Jacoby Brissett is. Now, Tom Brady, late in his career, learned how to avoid getting hit and getting sacked. When he knew he couldn't complete the pass, he just threw it at the receiver's feet or one-hopped it to the receiver. Right. Now, I don't think we can teach Drake May how to do that this year, but something like that. I mean, there needs to be a good quarterback coach who can coach him to avoid getting hit by that. He's got some, we saw in preseason. He's pretty elusive. I don't know how elusive he's going to be when there's the 3 linemen and 2 linebackers coming after him with this offensive line. But I'd say we're pretty close. Chris Gasper in today's Globe had a pretty good piece. He said, start him in the game against Jacksonville over at Wembley Stadium because there's really no home crowd there, and maybe that might be a neutral field, might be a good place for him to get a start.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, one of the things I would say to sort of counter your argument is, yeah, he looked good in those shots he got in the preseason against guys that are working at Wendy's now. Yeah. Nobody was playing who he's going to be playing against Sunday against Houston or next week against Jacksonville. So you have to, sort of temper that a little bit. Number one. Number two, if you make this move and it's a disaster, and there's a million ways to define a disaster, he doesn't have to get hurt to totally lose his confidence. And if he does, and then you pull him and you put the other guy back in, well, forget the season. There'll be a guy in that locker room that thinks they have any chance to win any game. So you can play him. Look, who knows? Maybe he's going to come out and play like Jaden Daniels. I don't think so. First off, Jaden Daniels was a better. There's a reason he was the 3rd guy picked and not the 1st guy picked or the 2nd guy picked. He was picked, at the bottom of the top 3. Well, go look at the history of, and there's a long history of this. When there's been 2 or 3 or 4 highly drafted quarterbacks, very few of the ones at the bottom end of that top 3 or 4 make it. Most of them are Akili Smith. They're not Pat Mahomes.
Rick Mara.
Rick Mara. Yeah. I mean, Ryan Leaf.
Yep.
You're talking about 1 and 2. And the second guy couldn't do it. There's a reason, those other 2 guys were picked ahead of this guy. There's a reason, Now, you could argue, well, what do you got to lose at this point? Well, what you got to lose is the guy that you just drafted 3rd. And you look at Jordan Love, who's been the opposite. When they first put him in as a starter, he wasn't good. And he'd been sitting for several years. Now he's pretty good. Great, not so sure, but certainly pretty good. If you put him in this year, and he's the guy who ends up with 57 sacks, like it's projected for. I mean, do you guys think that the offensive line is going to protect him better than they protecting Brissett?
No, but he's more elusive than Brissett is. You know, here they come. You know, all right, let's take the sack.
Right. Well, I would only argue this: Brissett was a lot more elusive before the first 21st or 22nd sack. You know, after a while, unless you're an idiot, you take the snap and go, "This ain't going to be good." You know.
Okay, hold on. I need to reach out for just a second here. Okay, let's just pause. Come back and take a deep breath, because campers. I need to talk to the campers in the audience. Because they're elusive. Okay, that's why they're campers, so they can get up and move when they have to move, right?
Yeah.
You're ready to see what's new for 2025. Campers Cold Springs RV has next year's models, and they are arriving daily. So check out the latest in pop-ups and travel trailers, the fifth wheelers, and motorhomes, whichever you think you can be the most elusive in, and get away with it. And tell them Bob Lobel and Mike Lynch sent you. Cold Springs RV, the doors are always open and you can freely browse. If you want to see the latest in camping, get the Cold Springs RV. I know a guy that had a camper. It's in Raymond, New Hampshire campground. Right next to him was a woman, and she had her own camper, and they were both happy campers once they got a chance to get together. As the case is with most relationships, they don't last forever. So at the stroke of midnight, I don't know which one left, but she was gone in her camper. She had the freedom to leave with her camper, and they still were happy campers. So it just gives you an opportunity to go and arrive and come when you want to do it. And the destination for all things camping is Cold Springs RV. Learn more online at coldspringsrv.com. They're in Ware, New Hampshire, which is west of Goffstown, north of Tingsboro, and that's coldspringsrv.com. Thank you very much for that opportunity, because I think it's an important message. Mike?
What was the camper's name? It wasn't Jabril Peppers, right?
No, it was not. I'm not at liberty. I'm not at liberty to divulge the names.
Okay.
Sorry.
Just wondering.
No, it's all right. It's just one of those.
All right.
things.
So Ron Borges, your payment for being on this show is that you get to drive the Lobel Lynch cruiser, which is an updated version of the Madden cruiser.
I like it.
Cross country. Okay.
I like
it. You got to take one player, and you have to pick a quarterback. You can go all the way back to Otto Graham, Bobby Lane if you want, right up until Patrick Mahomes. But you got to take a quarterback to ride shotgun cross country with you. We'll fly you back from California. So who would it be that would ride? What quarterback in the National Football League, past or present, would be your buddy riding shotgun?
Oh, that's easy. Kenny Stabler, party hardy from one end to the other.
Really?
Oh, yeah. We're going to have a great time. We may never get to the West Coast, but we're going to have a lot of fun on the trip. That's for sure. One of the greats.
Well, tell us why.
Oh, I mean, Staker, he was just the best. I mean, that guy, I mean, you want to talk about a leader. The Raiders would follow that guy into the flames of hell. You know, I mean, he just had it. You know, it's hard to put your finger on it, but you know when a guy's got it, and he had it. I'll never forget, he threw 5 picks in a game against the Broncos one year. So I go in the locker room after. I had a good relationship on him after. I said, "Oh, Snake, it's kind of a rough game, you know, 5 picks." I said, "Why'd that happen?" He said, "Well, they just kept getting open." I just cracked out. I said, "Yeah, all right,
That's
okay."
pretty good.
That was him. You know, it's like, I'm not gonna get too upset about it. But you know, it's funny, you know, Mike talking about you know, throwing Drake May to the Wolves there. And maybe he's a little more elusive, although I would postulate that within a month he'd be a lot less elusive than he was when he first got in there. But is his presence going to lead to the offensive line not holding 5 times in a game? Is it going to lead to them not giving up the 3rd most sacks in the NFL at the moment? 17.
So why have him on the team, Ron? You know, why is he on the team if he's just going to be sitting back there and just, you know, with his little earpiece in? And
well, you know, I think that, you know, he's the future, not necessarily the present. I mean, that's and I think you have to remember this too. If you're ownership or upper management, you just saw what happened to Mac Jones. And Mac Jones was part of the problem. Don't get me wrong. I was never sold on him. And I always thought he's a good example of what happens when you take the fourth or fifth, quote unquote, best quarterback in the draft. You end up with a guy who's going to be a backup quarterback. But he had a good rookie year. Not great, but certainly not anywhere near as good as people talked about it at the time. But what happened? He spiraled right down the toilet. That's what they don't want to have happen again. Now, maybe they're overly cautious, to your point, Mike, because of that. But I think you oftentimes are, recent history is what you remember the most. And I don't think they want to see that happen again to the next guy. I mean, I don't even know who the quarterback coach is, but I know he ain't nothing. Yeah, I know he ain't nothing special. And Van Pelt the same thing. And when you look at their staff, I don't know who was picking those coaches, but I've heard people say, why didn't they bring in Kingsbury, who's out there with the Arizona Cardinals and is a great offensive mind by all accounts and doing a great job out there? Because he didn't want to come here. That's why. That's what part of the equation of what's going on here. Why didn't they get this free agent? Because they didn't want to come here. They used to come here because Tom Brady was here. Why would you come here if you can? Somebody said, well, they could have got Kirk Cousins. What? Why would Kirk Cousins come here? That would be an idiotic decision for him. I can go over here. Good team, good place to live, no taxes, better players, or I can go to New England, freeze my ass off, pay twice as much in tax, and be on a terrible team with an offensive coordinator who's never called a play in the National Football League. So all these arguments that they should have got this guy or they should have got that guy. Look at the receiver from the 49ers. He refused to trade it. I won't come there.
All right.
Yeah.
The Jets fired their head coach today.
Yeah.
Now he's had a few years to prove that he can't win because he was like 20-36 or whatever the record was. Is there any chance that Kraft is getting antsy already with all the mistakes that Gerard Mayo and his staff are making? All those game management mistakes, all those repeat mistakes, all of the things that Gerard Mayo is showing that he's not ready to be a head coach. As nice a guy as he might be and as good a leader as he might be, this is a different kind of animal.
Right.
Is there any chance that the guy that said, I fell in love with Gerard Mayo 5 years ago and I knew he was going to be the successor to Belichick, that he might reverse course and say, well, this probably wasn't the best decision for either one of us?
I would say there's less than zero chance of that, because to do that, you have to look in the mirror and say to yourself, I made a mistake. Which the Crafts aren't that good at that. They're not that good at saying I made a mistake. It's not one of their strong points. No. No, if he was 3 or 4 years into this and this was the mess, well, then, yeah, you can fire him and say, well, yeah, the guy was incompetent or whatever. But no, I don't think so. Plus, I think for the most part, he's doing what he's being told to do.
What does that mean, Ronnie?
I don't think they want to. I don't think they want to risk the young quarterback's future on a team they know stinks.
Rolling Stones, Bob. Under my thumb. Under my thumb. Rolling Stones. That's what it is. That's what Gerard Mayo is. That's what they want. That's what they didn't have for the last 20-something years. He's gone on record of saying, why do you keep that asshole around? He says, well, give me a couple of 7 and 9 seasons and he'll be gone. And that's basically what happened.
So are you telling me that Kraft is sitting in a room and said, I don't want Mayo to play or May to play?
I believe that. I don't know that he's actually outwardly saying it, but we've all worked for people. They don't have to really say it for you to know what they want. Now, in my case, more than a few times I didn't listen, even though I knew what they were, and that doesn't work out that great for you. But Yeah, I think that they don't want to risk. They've invested in this guy. They've picked him as the guy. He's the future of the team. They know what they've got, which is a pretty bad football team. What's the upside of putting him out there? See, that's the part I don't understand of people who want to see him play.
Fair.
Are you going to win 8 more games? No, you're not. You know.
Yes, you are right here.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's right.
Right here.
And I would say this to Mike, as an advocate for putting him in. You want to put him in? Then why don't you put him in this Sunday? Why wait till Jacksonville, like Gasper said? If you think he's ready to play, then put him in against Houston in that defense, and let's see what he does. Well, they don't want to. Even the advocates don't want to do that. Well, let's wait till Jacksonville. Well, okay, what's going to be better that way? Jacksonville isn't as good. You just lost to arguably a team worse than you are in the Dolphins.
Yeah.
So
Boy, they get bad in a hurry, huh? The Dolphins.
Well, I think, and when you don't have the quarterback, when you don't have the trigger man, I mean, if Tua was there, they're a whole different team. And you've got a guy playing quarterback, and look, all credit to him. He was doing 3 weeks ago the same thing I was doing, which was sitting on his sofa watching NFL games on Sunday and watching the red zone or whatever. So now he's out there playing. And you just same thing with the Jets coach. If you don't have the quarterback in this league now, you're doomed.
Yeah.
You're doomed. It's not like the old days where, the Ravens could win the Super Bowl, with a journeyman quarterback and just a rock rib defense and a decent running game. You can win some games if they're good enough, but you can't survive. And when you look at Miami, and I think people have kind of forgotten this. They didn't just lose their first string quarterback; they lost their second string quarterback too. So now you've got a guy who's, like I say, was not even in the league a month ago. So I think that explains a lot of their problem. Here, it's just been dry rot for too long. I mean, look at this defense, because we always harp on the offense. So I'll harp on the defense. But you two guys around forever. Look at their defense. And think of their defenses when they were top-notch, playoff caliber team. What player starting on this defense this coming Sunday against Houston would have started on that defense?
Only Gonzalez, maybe.
Maybe Gonzalez, maybe. But not ahead of Ty Law.
Correct.
And probably not ahead of Asante Samuel. But maybe we'll give you that. Mike, anybody else?
No, there's nobody in that defense.
So you're talking about going from that kind of defense to a defense where, at the best, one guy could play on that team. Now let's look at their offense. What player on their present offense would have started on any of those Patriot playoff teams?
Maybe Stevenson.
Maybe Stevenson.
Maybe.
Because, maybe. Except fumbling the ball.
Yeah.
That would sit him down.
And by the way, on the whole subject of fumbling the ball and going to be benched, how does that word get out to the media? I mean, that would never happen with Parcells. It would never happen with Belichick. Nobody would know that somebody's going to be benched.
Right.
How does that happen?
Right. Well, because, losing situations and where things are looser, people talk. People are frustrated, people upset, and people, Mayo seems to be more user friendly. Freedom of speech, and all that seems to be a popular discussion item these days. So you just feel you can get it. The other reason is when your team stinks like this. I'm a starter on this team, especially if I'm a veteran player. I know they can't sit me down almost no matter what I do, because the next guy really stinks. I stink a little bit. This guy is odorous behind me, So what are they going to do? And that's when things start to unravel, because now everybody's worst instincts take over rather than their best instincts, and now you're putting out fires all over the place. You've got some guy who works for the Patriots writing doing a podcast saying there's an insurrection in the locker room. You got a defensive lineman come out and saying we got selfish players, which he was telling the truth. Your job is to hold the edge. Instead, you decide to rush the quarterback, and he runs right around you, and our whole defense falls apart. The greatest lesson, and there was a lot of good lessons that Belichick left behind, but the greatest lesson for every athlete from Pop Warner League to professional sports: do your job. If each guy just does his job, we're good. We're going to be pretty good. But if one guy doesn't, then it doesn't matter what the other 10 guys do. And so there's a lot of that problem, I think, for their team. But they just the worrisome thing here is, say they play Houston and get rolled over, which I think is, it's a good chance of that. You never know from week to week, but there's a good chance of it. Now you're 1-5. You got to go all the way to England to play. You're arguing with each other, blaming each other for this, that, or blaming the coach, or both. Your coaches, the only way to stop that kind of stuff is winning. I don't care who the coach is. You can't stop it if you're not winning. I always said with Belichick, and it turned out to be somewhat true. He lasted a little longer because of his prior record, but you can't coach the way he coached or the way Parcells coached and lose. Nobody's going to listen to you in short order, and not. And by the end, that's what happened to him. They don't want to hear it anymore, and they weren't listening anymore, and they weren't any good, but neither was he in their mind. So now you bring in this guy who's user-friendly and everything is great, and we're going to be collegial, blah, 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 and we're losing.
Isn't the way to go around the National Football League? You bring in a young offensive coordinator or an offensive-minded guy.
Right.
Now you can bring in a defensive guy if you've already got a guy in place who's a brilliant offensive mind, but we have neither on this team.
Right.
So,
well, Kingsbury didn't want to come here.
Right. Yeah, and I don't blame him. I don't blame him. Why would you? I mean, it just if you're a good coordinator, veteran guy, and you just looked at the roster and you're honest with yourself, you can say all you want. Mike, your dad was one of the great high school coaches in history. When he didn't have any talent, how good a coach was he? I mean, I'm going to ask Shula one time, what's the most important thing? He won all those games, 300. What was the most important factor in winning? I think he's going to say, my this, my that. He said, when the bus pulls up in front of the stadium, you got the best players. He said, that's it. He said, I can tell you all this stuff about scheming and this and that and being flexible and having a quarter. You got better players than the other guy, you're probably going to win. And if you don't, you're not. If you got a really good receiver, he gets both feet in bounds in the back of the end zone.
Right.
You can say what you want. It was a tough call. The rule is kind of a weird rule. I get it, but that's the rule. Get both feet in bounds.
What about Kraft in the Hall of Fame in the short time that we have, Ronnie? We don't have much time left, but I think we've had this conversation before, and it certainly has reared its ugly head as we've gone down the road here about all the work that the public relations department has done to try to get him in. Where do we sit on this?
If the organization had worked as hard getting better players in there, he'd have a much better chance of getting in. So I think I still think the odds are in his favor, but each year that goes by where everything unravels, I think some voters look and say, so the big deal was the quarterback, because as soon as the quarterback left, the whole thing fell apart. Fell apart for the coach, who has a 45% winning percentage in the 11 years he coached without Tom Brady. That's a career for most coaches. You took one guy out and he go and win. The owner built this great organization, the Patriots way. You took one guy out, not 10. You took one guy out, he couldn't win. So I think that I think it's always hard for an owner at least in my mind. I would always pick a player over a coach or an owner, and I would always pick a coach 99% of the time over an owner because they're not football people. Let's again be honest. They write the checks, and I think his greatest argument in his candidacy is that he saved him, from my knowledge, he saved pro football for New England. If that team went to St. Louis, there'd be no pro football team. They weren't coming here. They had a season ticket list of less than 9,000 people. They were not putting another team in Boston. It was not considered a football town, and he's turned it into a football town. So that to me is his best argument. But they go 4 and whatever again, 3 and whatever. I think he doesn't get it again this year. And there's other guys on the list. Everybody forgets that too. There's other deserving guys in that contributor category. I think we've already put in a couple of owners that made me scratch my head, saying, "Really, we're going to put in?" Because to me, if you own the team and you just spend a lot of money, okay, that's great for your fans and the city and the team. But that's kind of what you're supposed to do. It's like, what else did you do? What did you do larger than that for the league or whatever? And Kraft, has done a number of things that give him a good chance. But when you've spent 20 years pounding your chest about the Patriot way, and now they've lost their way, it's a tough sell when you're in that room, and there's 14 or 15 names, and that's your selling point. Well, where to go?
We should point out to our listeners that Ron is one of 50 people, right, that are on the committee?
Yeah.
So do you guys meet in person, or do you vote online? Like there are different committees. Do you vote on all those?
No, I vote on the senior committee, which I quite proud to be on that committee. There's a lot of guys, players that should be in the Hall of Fame that for whatever reason didn't get there, and we try to resurrect 1 or 2 a year. And I'm also on the 50-person committee. We used to meet twice a year in August and then the week of the Super Bowl. Post-COVID, that sort of changed everything, and we do it mostly via Zoom now, like we're doing now. Everybody will be on the call, and you do your debates. But it's not, in my mind, quite the same as being together in the room, although it's close. I vote for baseball and boxing also. And the one thing I like about football is once or twice a year you do, whether it's on Zoom or live, you do face each other. So you're not like in baseball. I don't know if you guys vote for baseball, but basically you're just in your house, you're only hearing from people that you want to talk to about it. In this case, you're hearing arguments for everybody. I'm not on the contributors committee. I was on the coaching committee too for a while, but then they split that into a third subcommittee. So each one of those groups has a tough call. I think there's 19 or 20 people on the contributors committee, and there's a number of pretty deserving guys there.
Now, is that what Kraft falls on?
Yeah. It used to be coaches and contributors were together, and then the decision was made by the Hall Board of Trustees that was kind of unfair to the contributors because most of the time you're going to pick a coach because he's active, over. So they made it 3 different groups, and one guy comes out of each, and then we have lately 3 seniors.
So does it? I'm sure everyone's read the Van Natta article, right. And this campaign that's gone on with Stacey, who's a great guy, and I love. But it really, if I was a voter, it would really rub me the wrong way. It would turn me off.
Right.
Do you get the sense that has happened with some voters, that this campaign for Robert must be in is turning people off?
Yeah, I think initially it was okay. I tried to sort of gently counsel him. Like you say, Stacey's a great guy. He's doing his job, and he's also on a lot of pressure. I did tell him at one point, I think that you maybe need to take it easy a little bit, because what happens is you think you've got a good case, and you're pressing your case because you believe in it, not just because you work for the guy. I think Stacey is sincere that way, and it's human nature to begin to get irritated that Why aren't they listening to me? And if you're not careful, you become a little too strident, and then it does turn people off. I remember when when Eddie DeBartolo got in, Kraft said to me, "How can you put that guy in there? My God, he lost the team for bribing a governor," which is true, he did. And I said, "Well, number one, Eddie was a friend of mine, but Eddie didn't get in on my vote. I didn't vote for Eddie. Obviously, 80% of people did, so he's in, and he built a great franchise. But you're talking to the wrong person on that one. But that's what sort of starts to happen. I think you get offended by it, and the next thing you know, you're pushing maybe a little harder than you should. So yeah, I haven't really talked directly with any of the voters, but I've heard some rumblings that it became a little bit much, and I think he's actually backed off quite a bit, Stacey, this latest go around. And to be honest, Kraft didn't help himself with some of the, and Belichick didn't help him either with some of the trouble that they got in. You're talking about putting in an owner whose team has paid the two biggest fines in the history of the sport for cheating. And you can say what you want, and you can say it's BS, and it was everybody's doing it. You can say whatever you want, but if everybody's doing it, how come only one guy got caught? Twice. Well, eventually Denver did get caught, but who was the coach in Denver? Disciple of the Patriot way. So, it's you can't ignore those things. And I think what happens is the lines are really thin. You guys can imagine whether we're talking about players or coaches. Andre Tippett just told me recently he was on. They created a screening committee of a bunch of Hall of Famers to go over the big list. For example, with the seniors, it was 100 plus names, to cut it down to 50. And then we as voters would get that list of 50. We always used to do the whole thing ourselves because they wanted to get some other opinions. And he said, I had no idea how hard it was to do. It's very easy when you're on the outside to say, well, how could they put in this guy? How could they not put in Kraft? How could they? Well, when you're there and you see what other people have done, what other people have accomplished, you see there's arguments for other people too. And I think that's the problem. It's a combination of bad timing with losing. Clearly, in my opinion, the value of the quarterback over everybody else who was in the organization. If people didn't get it before, then they're just blind and stupid, or they're just digging in their heels.
Does Orchids of Asia?
Doesn't help. It doesn't help. Now it shouldn't really hurt. Because unlike baseball, we don't really have, and I'm glad we don't really have like a morality clause, which they have in baseball, which some guys can use to, keep out whoever they want. I don't really like that because this is not this is not the Saints Hall of Fame. It's the Football Hall of Fame. It's like what you did in football. So it shouldn't be a problem.
In the words of Parcells, we're not talking about a bunch of choir boys here, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is what it is. You don't have some of those guys, those edgy guys, shall we say, you're not going to win very many games. So it shouldn't be a problem. But my guess is subconsciously, and again, I don't vote for that until they bring out the candidate. So I would only vote for up or down on Kraft, for example, once the contributor committee brings out whoever they bring out. I don't have any say in it prior to that. But I would think when you are eliminating people and you've got a number of people who are probably qualified, well, then the reasons to eliminate people get further and further. The lines get thinner and thinner. So anything like that probably doesn't help you. Although bribing a governor didn't hurt Eddie DeBartolo. So some people might say, and losing the franchise because of it. So a lot of people would say that was a lot more offensive than anything that Bob Kraft was involved in. But I'm sure it didn't help. I'm sure it didn't help. Now he's 80. What is he? 83 or 4 or whatever. So I'm sure his family, rightfully so, is you'd like to, if you're going to get in, you like a guy to get in, when he's alive and healthy. So I'm sure they know the clock's ticking in that regard, as it is for all of us. But I think he's still a pretty live candidate. He's come close, I know, a number of times from guys that are on that committee or voters, because we have women now too, voters on the committee, that he's been down. I think he's been in the final three a couple times. And then it gets really hard. I've been in that situation with seniors where you're basically eliminating one or two people that also deserve to be in there. But you can only – so I tell people all the time when they complain about, well, how could you not get Rodney Harrison? Well, because, there was 15 players, and there's a good case for every one of them. Nobody's in there who say, how this guy – I mean, rarely. It does happen occasionally, but it's very rare. So you're eliminating guys that oftentimes in the room, someone say, well, we know Mike Lynch is a Hall of Famer, but so is Bob Lobel, and we're putting in Bob Lobel. When it comes out as you're an anti-vote for the other people, but it isn't necessarily. It's just, and I think Kraft's been kind of caught up in that a couple times. It's the other thing is you're not going to put in an owner every year. There's other qualified. Bucko Kilroy's very strong candidate in my opinion, for contributor category. He was an all-pro player. He was an NFL coach. He was an executive in Dallas, the guy more responsible, according to what I've been told by Upton Bell and others, for what the Cowboys became than Gil Brandt was, even though Gil got the credit. He's an executive for 40 years. He built two great and was involved in the building of two great Patriot teams, that teams in the late 70s. Again, a team that went to the 85 Super Bowl and still was here, when the dawn of the great dynasty. Parcells had tremendous respect for Bucko Kilroy. To me, he's like the definition of a contributor. And there's others, so Kraft's up against a tough list. I think eventually he'll make it. I wouldn't bet on him this year. And if they can't find a way to win again, well, then it could get tough.
Let me get one more spot in right here, Ron, before we let you go. Hey, if you're thinking about a new vehicle, go where Lobel and Lynchy go. Go see our good friend George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota. We have been customers for years because we know George Gray will treat you right. They're a family-owned and operated dealership that we trust, and you can trust as well. Go see the big wheel, we call him, George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota, 409 Mass Ave in Lexington. I was in there last week for an oil change and a tire rotation, and I had a great time. Mike Barnacle was actually in there. I saw him when I was sitting in the waiting room. So
Barnacle left his Porsche at home to drive his Toyota.
I don't know. He had this lame. I don't know what he had. But it's one of the biggest SUVs I've ever seen. I said, "Who rides in this thing?"
Of course.
Well, just me.
Really? Like, how much car do you need, man? I know.
It must get about 400 yards per gallon gas, And he was trading it in. It was a 2022, and it had 5,000 miles in it. And he was trading it in.
Oh my goodness! Wow, you can see if you're a sports writer, your car has 310,000 miles on it, if at all possible.
Right. That's what
Ryan did a great job today. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for having me and remembering me. I appreciate it.
No, come on. Love talking to you.
You're the best. I love talking to you. Great stories, great resources. Half a century of working in the NFL, and still get your finger on the pulse. The Hall of Fame conversation is fascinating to me, and as is your insight and everything else. So thanks, Ron.
That. I'm hoping I get another chance to argue for Rodney Harrison this January. I think he's a deserving candidate. He's got some things that are hard to overcome because players didn't like him, and so he didn't go to a lot of Pro Bowls. But so what? Everybody saw what kind of player that he was. He was a difference maker, that's for sure. So hopefully,
look at Lobel. Nobody liked him. He made a career out of it.
Seriously.
Exactly. Look at all those plaques he's got in the wall. God, wow.
Well, I got to be back by midnight, so let's hurry up and get off the show. See you later. Great job,
All
Ron.
right,
Okay,
see
guys, thanks a
everybody.
lot.
I got a
Anytime.
feeling he'll be
All
back
right,
before
folks,
we
thanks
know
for
it.
checking in,
Thanks.
and don't forget to follow us at unanchoredboston.com.